Welcome, everyone, to the Information's TITV. My name is Akash Pasricha. It is Thursday, October 23rd. We are taking a full tour of the tech sector today, folks. First up, could Apple and SpaceX finally reach a deal together to work together on their satellites? Our Apple reporter joins us with some new reporting and talks of a $10 billion sale in the space sector. We're also talking about our scoop that Adobe considered a $3 billion acquisition of an AI video company. And separately, we're talking with the CEO of Traba about how he is using AI to get more people into jobs. We're then going to talk to our Google reporter about how the company is courting younger coders with a multi-million-dollar contract with a major college organization. And finally, our editor-in-chief, Jessica Lessin, sits down with Bain Capital Ventures to discuss modern comm strategies in the AI age. We've got a lot to get to, so let's get right on into things. SpaceX has quickly become a giant in the arena for satellite communications, and a new story my colleagues published today in The Information reveals that the company is adding more features that could make it more enticing for Apple to work with them. Plus, elsewhere in the satellite world, there has been talks of a potential sale of the satellite company that Apple currently works with. I want to bring on our Apple reporter, Erin Tilley, to tell us more about what he's learned, and Tim Farrar, president of satellite consulting company TMF Associates, for a bit of his analysis. Tim and Erin, it's great to have you on the show. Welcome.
Thanks very much.
So, Erin, I want to start with you. Look, on my iPhone, I see the satellite thing popping up, especially when I'm in the subways in New York. There's no service, and it's trying to send a message. I don't really know where the message is getting sent through, and half the time it doesn't even send. What is this satellite communications feature that the iPhone has right now? What is it supposed to do?
Yeah, so it first launched in 2022 as primarily about sending messages to emergency services via satellite when you're off, sort of off in the middle of nowhere without satellite reception. And so you need a clear line of sight often just to get that reception. And so it was about sending it to emergency services. And since then, they've rolled out doing it to sending messages to friends and family, sharing locations. So they've expanded the features over time, but it's primarily kind of when you're out of cell service in the middle of nowhere, on back roads, on camping trips, sort of when you're outside of that.
And so who is Apple currently working with to be able to have that functionality on the iPhone?
Yeah, so since 2022 when they launched it, their sole provider has been this company called Globalstar. And at the time, the company was having some challenges. So when Apple came knocking, they got a pretty good deal out of it as far as as a supplier relationship. And that's been their partner since.
And Tim, Erin just mentioned the company Globalstar was going through some challenges. I mean, just walk us a little bit through the landscape here of the overall space sector, and then we'll get to the news in just a second.
Yeah, sure. I mean, Globalstar and Iridium date back to the late 1990s when we had a boom in everyone thinking their phones were going to communicate with satellite all the time. Those companies went through bankruptcy in the early 2000s and really had to refocus on niche applications like government and enterprise and a few people obviously who go out into the middle of nowhere. That's only been a small market, and Globalstar needed to update its satellite system, replace its current satellites that were coming to the end of its life. And Apple showed up with some money to do that. And so it's been a good partnership for Globalstar. They generated $140 million of revenue from Apple last year. Apple's invested about $2 billion to help build new satellites over the next few years. But it's now, what's that going to offer compared to what SpaceX is going to offer? I mean, they're a long way behind, and I think that's the challenge for Apple.
So, Erin, tell us about what you've heard now between the talks between Apple and SpaceX, and possibly the ways in which SpaceX is kind of configuring its product now to open itself up to opportunities with Apple.
Yeah, so Apple and SpaceX would be a huge deal for SpaceX. So we've heard that SpaceX has been configuring its satellites in order to support basically the current feature set that exists with Globalstar. So there's certainly some indication that they're preparing for a partnership. And this all goes back 3 years ago, right before Apple announced its satellite feature first in 2022, Elon Musk, who obviously owns SpaceX, tried to swoop in and get a deal with Apple, offering kind of exclusive partnership for a lot of money, $5 billion. And it was just so much money, and it was such a sort of hard bargain that Apple shut it down. They'd already done a lot of work setting things up with Globalstar, but this would be a return of that potentially. But yeah, they're preparing things. Apple on their end is preparing their support for 5G non-terrestrial networks that could potentially support what SpaceX will offer. So there are certainly signs that they're talking.
Tim, I want to ask you, for people who don't know a whole lot about space, myself included, is Apple the biggest customer here? I'm sure there are bigger customers. I mean, Apple is one that we've obviously heard of. I mean, how big a deal is Apple in the grand scheme of customers that are buying access to the satellite technology at all?
Yeah, I mean, so one way of selling the service is to go to mobile operators, and traditionally that's been the way of partnering for the satellite providers. SpaceX has been partnered with T-Mobile. AST, which is their main rival in the US, has been partnered with AT&T and Verizon. But going via the handset manufacturer has a lot of advantages. This is a pretty challenging service to implement. You need to get it into handsets because you need to implement the new spectrum that SpaceX has now bought. And so if they could work with Apple, that's the phone that an AT&T or Verizon can't refuse to sell. So immediately you would expect SpaceX to be able to offer service through those other companies, not just through T-Mobile as it does at the moment.
And are those deals that satellite companies sign with the mobile carriers, are those bigger deals than what Apple has, or do we know anything about the size there?
Well, I think today the revenues have been pretty limited. We've only just got started with the SpaceX T-Mobile deal. AST is still in the process of trying to launch its satellites, but Apple is already paying Globalstar well over $100 million a year, and that number is going to increase substantially as they go forward. So, this is a good business for Globalstar. And it comes from the fact that Apple wants to sell more iPhones. It's quite difficult to persuade people to pay for these satellite services. You don't know you need it until you need it, and you break your leg out in Yosemite National Park. So it's been difficult to generate a lot of service revenues, and I think T-Mobile hasn't seen a huge amount of usage so far, so that hasn't meant them paying a lot of money over to SpaceX so far. So much less than Apple is paying Globalstar right now. The problem for Apple is there's no obvious evidence that they've sold a lot more handsets as a result of this deal with Globalstar. As I say, people don't know they need it, and so they don't necessarily consider.
And they don't even. I mean, I can't even tell if the thing is working or not. I just sort of bank on the message getting there, and sometimes it says satellite connection, but I haven't been out in the woods very much using it, so I couldn't tell you if it works or not. But Erin, so let's come back to the Globalstar side of the story. I mean, Tim has talked a lot about some of the difficulties of operating in this landscape. You had some reporting that the company was in talks to sell itself for a pretty whopping price tag. Tell us about what you found.
Yeah, so Globalstar, my understanding is that they've been kind of looking for a deal for a while. Its chairman Jay Monroe bought the company out of bankruptcy in the 2000s. It was an investment firm, Thermo, and he's been looking to do a deal for a while. And this is potentially big, but also the company is not valued massively. But he has been looking for around more than 10 billion. And certainly the deal last month between SpaceX and EchoStar, where SpaceX bought EchoStar's spectrum for 17 billion, was exciting moment to kind of prove there's value in this kind of spectrum. So there's hope, but it's a lot of money, and there's not a lot of buyers, potential buyers here. So it's going to be potentially challenging.
Tim, I want to end with you here. For people who might think that everything in space is still years away. The talk of, hey, well, what actually impacts me as a consumer right now? People might say, look, I mean, I have my phone, I have my data plan, it seems to work fine. Why should people really care about this deal and this story and the the burgeoning satellite sector at large?
Well, I mean, Apple needs to, up its sales over time and grow market share in the handset industry, and an association with SpaceX could well be a route to doing that. If they can sell another 5 or 10 million handsets a year to people who this service appeals to, then that's billions of dollars of extra revenue, which we should definitely need. And I mean, that's the decision they have to take. Is it worth perhaps paying some money to SpaceX for exclusivity in exchange for the prospect of a significant boost to sales?
Right.
And that's what we're going to see.
And last question, Tim, do you think this deal or a deal like this happens between Apple and SpaceX? Could you see that partnership happening?
I think that's very likely. I think that SpaceX needs the handset support. It can't just rely on people just building chips and it naturally making its way into handsets. I think the handsets are optimized. The software that Apple's implemented with Globalstar is really quite elegant at the moment, and I think they could do a really good job implementing something for SpaceX as well that would make the service a lot more appealing.
Great. Well, Tim and Erin, I want to thank you both for joining us to keep the show moving here. Enterprise software giants have looked closely to fast-growing AI startups to help keep them current and find ways to continue growing. The latest example of that, Adobe, over the past few months, has talked with AI avatar video company Synthesia about acquiring the company for $3 billion. That deal never ended up happening, but I want to bring on our Deputy Bureau Chief of Venture Capital, Katie Roof, to tell us more about what she's learned. Katie, welcome back to the show. It's great to have you.
Great to be here.
So let's talk about this deal. What do we know about Adobe's efforts to acquire Synthesia?
So my understanding is this was a pretty serious effort. Adobe's already an existing investor in Synthesia, and they wanted to buy it, but the two parties could not reach an agreement. Synthesia thinks they're worth even more than the $3 billion that was discussed, and they are currently in talks to raise a new funding round before the end of the year at an even higher valuation than that.
So it was really just price that was the main reason this fell apart?
Exactly. And so, it's interesting because it tells a story that Adobe is interested in making acquisitions again. I'd broken the Adobe Figma news at one point, and that deal never happened due to regulators. That was quite the ordeal for Adobe, but they, like all the other tech incumbents, want AI.
Talk about the rationale here for Adobe. Couldn't it just build this in-house?
Yeah, and I think that's always the question with M&A. Do you build it or do you buy it? But sometimes they like to buy a team that already works well together, a product that customers already like. So Synthesia is already used by a lot of corporate clients who are creating AI avatars to build corporate videos, whether that's for marketing or training or all sorts of things, really. And so they just like the product.
Well, and one of the things I've been thinking about is just how ubiquitous these deals have been getting in terms of larger tech companies going after these AI video companies. I mean, Meta, too, we've heard about their efforts to do deals with companies like Midjourney. This seems to be something that the consensus is, hey, we need to move quickly and we need to work with startups to help get the talent that we need, really.
Well, Meta, yeah, they've certainly been very active. So Meta actually also held M&A conversations with Synthesia, and they've held M&A conversations with just about every AI founder, it seems. They, at one point, I helped break the news that they bought 49% of Scale, and they, Meta realized that there's a lot of AI talent out there, and they wanted them in-house.
Well, Katie, I want to thank you for coming on. It's certainly an exciting name, Synthesia. Like you said, it's been floated around in many M&A talks, and so it's a deal that I was interesting to see having come through the pipeline. And of course, we'll have to see if Synthesia raises money now and what price tag they do value themselves at, because, like you said, they think they're worth more than $3 billion. We'll see if that comes through. That is Katie Roof, our Deputy Bureau Chief of Venture Capital here at The Information. Okay. We've talked a lot about jobs that AI can automate on this show, and while industrial roles and physical jobs aren't high up on that list, that's not to say AI won't change how those corners of the labor force may operate. Traba is a company that is at the center of that. The company is backed by a number of big-name venture capitalists, including Founders Fund and Khosla Ventures. I want to bring on the CEO and co-founder, Mike Shebat, to talk more about where he's taking his business. Mike, welcome to TITV. It's great to have you.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
So tell us what Traba is.
So Traba is a full stack labor platform that connects industrial businesses with high quality workers, and we're disrupting the $130 billion light industrial staffing industry.
And when you say light industrial staffing, what kind of staffing are we talking about here?
Yeah, so it's essentially this massive backbone of the economy, whether it's manufacturing, food processing, or fulfillment, all the workers that do the tasks in those facilities.
And so these are like the short-term staffing shifts that these food manufacturers, I mean, I guess you need like 100 workers next week type of thing because of seasonal changes, or how does it work?
Yep, exactly. Whether it's seasonal changes, but there's also the use case of when they get a big customer request. There's just a lot of volatility in the supply chain, and the supply chain depends on the staffing industry to help connect them to workers to supplement those workflows.
Okay. And so what sorts of tools have these companies been using traditionally to help them staff these shifts on short notice? And then, why is Traba different?
Yeah, so the staffing industry, it's a massive industry, but it's terribly inefficient. They can only provide 46% of the workers that businesses request. It takes actually weeks to fill a request rather than same day or next day like Traba does. So what we do is we basically take all the manual crazy workflows that the staffing industry uses, whether it's vetting or essentially arrival tracking, worker support, timekeeping, fraud detection. We've essentially created AI agents that do all of those workflows end to end. So our customers get really high quality workers, nearly perfect fill in a few hours.
And is it just finding the workers and sort of scheduling the shifts, or is your software also embedded in different ways on the ground, for example, how they, pay these workers and stuff like that?
Yep, we can actually provide instant payment to the workers, which makes a huge difference because of our fraud detection software. So we actually can have high confidence the worker was actually there, worked the shift, and provide that payment. Whereas the staffing industry doesn't have any technology. They're essentially relying on sign in, sign out sheets. And a lot of these customers have actually never seen the workers before. So there's a lot of back and forth to really figure out if the worker can get paid quickly. So that's why workers have flooded our platform as well.
How many companies do you work with, and how many workers do you have registered onto this system, I guess, that you have?
Yeah, so we have over 1,000 businesses across the country that rely on Traba and hundreds of thousands of workers. So
Okay.
it's quite scale at this point.
And what is the business model for Traba?
Yeah, so the business model works by the business sets the pay rate for the worker. So let's just say it's $20 an hour. Then the business will pay Traba a markup rate on that pay rate for us providing the workforce to them. So that usually is around 35%. So that would be a $7 revenue to Traba. $20 just goes straight to the worker within 30 minutes. And then we use that $7 to essentially pay bonuses, background checks, things like this. So from a margin standpoint, it's actually a very healthy margin. Most staffing companies in the United States are actually cash flow positive, EBITDA positive businesses. But of course, since we're a tech company and we're reinvesting in R&D, we are growing at like a negative EBITDA, but very positive margin, contribution margin.
And you talked about the business model. So how much revenue are you generating right now?
Yeah, so we've grown quite quickly. A couple months ago, we finished up with $20 million of annualized revenue, and we're actually going to finish the year with $40 million annualized revenue. So growing quite fast with bigger customers that are spending more money on our product.
So $40 million in annualized revenue by the end of 2025. And I just want to be clear. So the way that we measure that, I mean, this is basically, that is the total sum of the take rate. Like that's the total sum of the $7,
Yep.
$7 you're taking on top of everyone's hourly wage type of thing.
Yeah. We at Traba are really conservative with our financials. If we were to think about GMV, the full $27, we would actually be making hundreds of millions of dollars of annualized GMV, but we measure it on a net basis just to be more conservative with it.
You guys raised your last round, what, in 2023? Is that right?
Yep. Yep.
And I mean, give us a sense for growth. I mean, you said 20 million a couple months ago. So, I mean, the growth rate wise, I mean, that's fast.
Yeah. In 2023, we're only around when we raised our round from Founders Fund to lead their Founders Fund 8 fund, we were only at about 3 million. And just because we are capital efficient as a company, we haven't actually needed to raise financing since then. But yeah, we've grown quite sizably since then.
So, but you're not profitable right now, but you've got enough cash. You're saying you're not looking to raise anytime soon.
Well, we may raise over the next couple quarters as we actually are finding a lot of expansion opportunities. So our customers are actually relying on us as their tech provider. They see the disruption happening with AI, and they're coming to us to actually figure out how else we can automate other workflows that are highly manual in their operation. So we actually want to lean in here and see if we can grow even faster and generate even more lift with additional capital. But on a per shift basis, we do make money. We make actually almost 60% contribution profit. So real dollars on per shift. The money that is usually spent is just more on, engineers, designers, product, all those big things like that.
I want to zoom out just a little bit. We had the Tesla earnings call last night, and Tesla has obviously made a lot of noise about their humanoid robot ambitions. And certainly in these industrial settings, it feels like that is the first application for robotics. And we obviously see it in many points along the supply chain. You're kind of in an interesting point because you don't really fit into the equation where it's AI replacing white collar jobs, which we've talked about on this show. It's more about getting people in these industrial roles, getting them more opportunities. Do you think at all that some of this work can be automated by robots? I mean, how quickly is that coming? Are you seeing that with any of your customers at all?
Yeah, so I spend a lot of time with our customers, so I get to see what happens on the ground. And what I'll say is these businesses, they evolve every day. They switch out how they do things. So as of today, they really need a dynamic labor environment with human judgment. I will say though that as tech continues to get better, specifically robotics over the next 10 years, we believe that we're going to be well positioned to actually help guide those customers into the robotics age in a similar way that we've helped guide them into the AI age with improving a lot of their manual workflows. So I will say that it's funny you mentioned Tesla because I saw that this morning too. If you go back to 2018, Elon Musk himself actually tweeted that he was a champion of humans and he essentially tried to replace, like automate a lot of the gigafactory. And it didn't necessarily work. So he said that like he's bringing the humans back. But that being said, I do think that, humanoid robots will get there eventually. And I think that Traba will be well positioned to help facilitate that.
Great. Well, Mike, thanks for coming on the show. It's a fascinating business. That is Mike Shebat, the founder and CEO of Traba here on TITV. Okay. There are plenty of races in the AI age. Investors hunting for the next NVIDIA, companies dangling huge pay packages for top talent, and firms fighting to get developers using their coding tools instead of their competitions. Now, Google is adding fuel to that fire, making a play for younger coders. Google announced an exclusive 3-year multi-million-dollar contract with the college hackathon organization Major League Hacking. The group will promote Google's Gemini AI model and coding tools to its many developers. I want to bring on our Google reporter, Erin Wu, to tell us more about Google's strategy with all this. Erin, welcome back to the show. It's great to have you.
Thanks so much for having me.
So let's talk hackathons. What is Major League Hacking?
So Major League Hacking is this massive college hackathon organization. They have like 4,000 chapters. They say they reach 1 million developers. I don't know if you coded at all in college, but essentially a hackathon is...
Zero. None. Zero. I didn't even hang out with the coders.
It's essentially just a weekend-long or like a day-long competition to make something, essentially. Like you're given some kind of prompt, like oftentimes this runs for a whole weekend. People do not sleep very much, but people who do it tell me it's very fun.
Okay. And the idea here is you have to build something in a weekend type of thing, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So now Major League Hacking, what is their role in the college hackathon circuit, I guess, in America?
Yeah, so they're basically this big umbrella organization that runs a lot of hackathons, partners with a lot of hackathons. For example, they partner with CalHacks, which is the Berkeley Hackathon, which is happening this weekend. It's the biggest one. So they have this huge network of college developers that they can reach, essentially. And so that's what makes them interesting to Google, and that's why Google signed this deal with them.
Okay, and so what is the premise of this deal here? That every hackathon here will use Gemini and only Gemini? Is that the idea?
So obviously, like the students can use whatever they want, but MLH is doing all of this stuff to promote Gemini. So this ranges from starting hackathons with like a 3 to 5 minute demo of like, here's how you could use Gemini to like build a hackathon project, hosting on-site quote evangelists from Google Cloud who can explain how to use Gemini, having like best use of Gemini categories in the competition. So there's a lot of different ways to essentially introduce people to this AI model, incentivize people to use it.
Okay, and how much is this deal worth? Do we know?
We don't totally know. I talked to MLH, they would not tell me. I talked to Google, they would not tell me. What we know is it's a multi-million-dollar contract over 3 years, and I'm told that every single year is worth millions of dollars.
So, it's kind of interesting here because this feels very much like a play for Google to say, hey, if we can teach the young coders of America to use our tool to code everything and vibe code it, I guess, whatever it is, they will keep using it throughout the rest of their career. I think the strategy seems pretty clear to me. My question for you really is how Google's AI coding tools compare to all of the other coding tools that are out there. Do we have any data?
We have some data. So it's a little bit hard to tell because OpenAI, Anthropic, they're private companies. They don't totally publish their user numbers. So what Google has said is that 9 million developers are building on Gemini. 1 million developers are building with Gemini CLI, which is one of these new coding tools that they've developed. In terms of how that stacks up to competitors, it kind of varies a little bit depending on what stats you use. So there's this coding startup Modu that we've written about before that says that Gemini is trailing Anthropic, OpenAI, this startup called Cursor in terms of download. Another software registry says that, well, it's still trailing Anthropic, but it's like on par with OpenAI. We don't quite know. I mean, the idea is essentially this is a really fierce competition that a lot of the labs are focusing on.
And how have these tools changed the way computer science and coding is taught in colleges at large?
Yeah. So it depends on the school, obviously. It depends on the student. Like I was talked to a lot of college students as I was working on this story, and these kids, like, they love to code, right? Like, this is their big thing. They're kind of like, oh, well, like, I'm using this a lot for side projects in my classes. I'm still not personally using it as much. One student was telling me, like, yeah, like, he was in a systems class and like the midterm was a disaster because like nobody knew how to code. And so there's definitely a lot of impacts. One of the other interesting things, though, with these younger kids is that it's changing the way that a lot of them are thinking about CS education and like CS degrees and like what they can do with them. I talked to one student at Stanford who was saying that, yeah, she's not sure that SWE or software engineering is going to be a viable career in a few years, which was obviously crazy to me as someone who graduated from Stanford in journalism at a time when all of the viable careers were software engineering. So it's really changing like the way that young people are thinking about like what paths they want to pursue. Like she's thinking about cybersecurity because it seems more stable.
Well, it was a really interesting story, Erin. Thank you for coming on and explaining to us. That is Erin Wu, our Google reporter here at The Information. Okay. Social media is always evolving, and lately it has drastically changed how public officials and brands are interacting with their audiences. That shift was front and center this week when Fidji Simo, OpenAI's CEO of applications, communicated the launch of the company's new web browser Atlas on X and Substack instead of using more traditional channels. I want to play for you a conversation that Jessica Lessin, our editor-in-chief, had with Allison Braley, partner and head of marketing at Bain Capital Ventures, about modern marketing and communication strategies. Here is that conversation.
Thank you, Akash. And I'm so excited to be here with Allison Braley. Allison is a marketing partner at Bain Capital Ventures. And more than that, just someone who, well, not more than that, but someone who I have always turned to for the vibe, if we shall say, in all things marketing and comms in Silicon Valley. Worked at The Information long ago as well. So, Allison, thanks for being on TITV.
Thank you so much for having me, Jess. This reminds me and takes me back to the times of working with you in the newsroom. So I love being back in the family.
I was like, did we even have cameras back then? It feels like so ancient. No,
It was a while ago.
Haven't changed.
They sure have.
Speaking of which, so I know your brain works like mine. So I know you're watching the big OpenAI browser launch this week,
Yes.
Atlas. And you're not just thinking, okay, what does this browser do? I'm going to go play with it. But you're looking at how they announced it. I'm just guessing here. But I was struck because Fiji Simo, who's the new CEO of apps, fresh over from Instacart in a big new job, announced it on X, and she linked to her Substack.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, talk about a leading question here, but I thought it was so interesting because I think we first met, more than 15 years ago when you were doing comms at Condé Nast. And it seems to me that the way of the road in tech company comms has been one voice, one company voice for a long time. And we see this at The Information because people struggle, like companies hate when we profile any of their executives because it's sort of like, no, it's not about this executive, it's about the company, it's about the team.
Yeah.
Now, that's kind of gradually been changing, I think. You're seeing more executives at tech companies have more social presence that's sort of their own. But this struck me as interesting. This is a official announcement on a personal Substack. Obviously, Altman has his own blog as well. What did you make of this strategy?
Yeah, so I thought there's both the OpenAI context of this and there's the broader context, right, as you alluded to. And so for Fiji specifically, it feels like the vision story is something that she's telling in this post. And so coming from her individually makes sense rather than publishing it to OpenAI's blog where you'd kind of expect things like this to be. But it feels like that channel is more reserved for product announcements and more kind of hard news. And the other nice thing this affords Fiji is more flexibility on voice and tone. She can be a little more casual on Substack and forward-looking versus more user-centric, which is going to be, this is available right now. This is the hard news. So I think, that platform allows her perhaps a little bit more flexibility to tell the story in her own words and really put her own stamp on it, which is likely to be, an ongoing mission of hers, I would imagine, at OpenAI, since Sam Altman is on the Mount Rushmore of tech CEOs. And that's a big sort of person to follow behind. And she probably wants to create her own voice, her own sort of personal stamp that she leaves on the company.
Is it also to sort of humanize the product itself a little bit? I mean, there's so much excitement about AI, so much fear around it. I wonder if leaning into that. I mean, she's long been very passionate about transforming healthcare and made some big investments in that. And I noticed when she announced she was going to the company, she was emphasizing that. So is there something about the product itself that sort of maybe necessitates a different approach?
It could. Yeah, that's an interesting thought. I do think Fiji's persona is very well liked within tech and within Silicon Valley. And so her being the messenger on more of these types of announcements feels really smart on their part and really comfortable. She's someone who's viewed as being very thoughtful, very philanthropic too, and sort of big-hearted to your point. And so her being the person who can put her own spin on this might feel more authentic than if it came from this sort of disembodied company voice that you often get on a company blog. But I do think there's like this bigger trend here that you alluded to that people talk about a lot these days in tech and increasingly outside of tech around going direct, which I've always argued is a false dichotomy. For most companies, people act like, oh, you either go direct or you're going through an intermediary, which is typically the media. But I think most companies, OpenAI included, still want to drive broader coverage in addition to like building their own audience by going direct. And so you don't really have to choose a lane. I think by developing her own voice, she becomes a more interesting person to talk to also for the media, who can now hear her own thoughts directly from her and have a sense of what they're getting from an interview with her that maybe they wouldn't get with an interview with Sam, who's likely the person that they most want to talk to. And so I think there's also this aspect of her building up her own personal brand, which benefits both her and the company.
That rings true. And I'm always tickled by the brands that are sort of these self-proclaimed go direct and then calling me all the time.
That's what I'm saying.
Because it just, which again, there's not attention there. There's only attention there if they make there be attention there, right? There's multiple ways to influence messaging. But let's play this out, right? And I think we have a lot of viewers and a lot of subscribers to the information who are executives who really want to think about how to stay ahead on comms and how to get attention amid, just more and more content, more and more, dare we say, AI slop of product announcements and so forth. Is the Substack or Beehive or you name, personal kind of newsletter blog platform a must for founders and execs in the Valley?
It really depends on your strategy and your strengths is the advice I often give to people. I do think it is important, particularly if you're your CEO, to have your voice out in the world, not just sort of as a disembodied company voice. It used to be that corporate comms drove the narrative and everyone kind of fell in line. And now increasingly we live in an individual-led world. And you feel that even in your social media analytics. The posts that come from the brand, even at BCV, don't do as well as the posts that come from the partners because people want to hear the news in your voice. They don't necessarily want to hear it filtered through your company brand. But I do think whether that's, if you're a founder, whether that's starting your own podcast, maybe you're amazing at memes and you're on X. Maybe you're a fantastic writer and you should have a Substack. Maybe you're like a real LinkedIn person and you're a big connector there. Whatever that channel is that's natural to you and probably 1,000 others I haven't thought of yet, I think it's really important to figure out what that is and lean into it rather than trying to be all things to all people.
What does it mean for the companies, right? So I agree. I often think of Elon as like, Elon was one of the first people where to me, the personality was bigger than all the companies, right? And so we actually had to understand Elon world. You just really had to understand Elon. And
but
then
to some degree, Zuck too.
Tesla, SpaceX. Sorry, what was that?
To some degree, Zuck too.
Yeah. I think just Elon spanned multiple, like in media world, we were organized around companies. And then he sort of turned that on his head, especially when he's, engineers just pop from one to the other. So it was like a different framework for kind of understanding power and decisions. But for the corporate comms people there, I mean, should they be sort of welcoming this with open arms, or are there risks to this more individual approach?
To Fiji specifically, I suspect they're very excited about it.
Yeah.
I think her having her own voice spreads the love around a little bit. You also think about like a Johnny Ive. Like there's all of these interesting personalities there now who can own the narrative on different topics rather than all roads leading back to Sam. As that company's valuation grows and their product surface area grows, it's just not realistic for all comms to flow through Sam, who's, in many ways an amazing spokesperson, but also makes missteps. I thought the picture of the Death Star was such an odd choice that belied some lack of understanding of the cultural kind of context of that image. And so I think having more spokespeople there is really beneficial to them. And if this is authentic to Fiji, if I were them, I'd be leaning into it. I don't think it matters as much anymore that everything ladders back to your domain, especially in a world of AI-driven search or GEO, as people are calling it now, also where your own domain, you talk about yourself, that used to benefit you. It really doesn't now. They don't take that into account as much. And so having independent domains, and no, it's not Reddit or Wikipedia, but still Substack is not the OpenAI domain, likely benefits them.
Say more about GEO.
Yeah, I mean, so as someone is searching for, let's say, an AI-powered browser or whatever it is, if all of that information about that is on your own domain page, and OpenAI, look, they're going to drive endless coverage for anything they do, so they're likely going to land there anyway. But if you're a startup founder who doesn't have that same level of fame, which is everyone, it's helpful to have conversations and put content in places that don't go back to your own domain, which immediately gets discounted. And so the game of SEO
discounted by the chatbot. So this is like the search optimization for the chatbot world.
Yeah, whether it's Perplexity or the little box up on top of Google. My mom is always claiming she doesn't use AI search, and then she's like, "But I do like that new box thing they added." And I'm like, so that's AI search. I don't think people even realize necessarily what they're using, but the game has changed, and It's no longer about getting people landing at the top of those links. It's about making sure that you're being referenced in that box at the top. And the way that you do that is dramatically different than prior iterations of what SEO looked like.
And it's less, optimizing, tagging the hell out of a centralized hub, and much more tracing conversation happening in different places. Is that
exactly
correct?
And trying to shape that as best you can without coming across as sort of an interloper. You're seeing more and more brands going on, whether it's Reddit, and sort of trying to insert themselves in the conversation in a way that feels really foreign, or, maliciously editing Wikipedia in ways that go against their terms of service. You're sort of seeing clumsy attempts at this, but I think creating content off of your own domain is one really smart way to do this.
Yeah. And then I guess lastly, I'm wondering, curious your take on this. I think having the personal as the spokesperson, I feel like also opens up a little more room for pushback. And this is something I'm feeling a lot in this moment from my seat of the information. You have obviously a lot of animosity against the traditional press, some of it deserved, some of it not.
Sure.
But regardless, you also have a lot of people who are out there pushing back, frankly, even when they called you to confirm the story. So people have their different agendas. But I also wonder if, there's a Meta spokesperson, Andy Stone, who takes to X to just dispute everything he doesn't like. Again, even things that are accurate, but to be that voice. I don't think that's necessarily bad, to be clear, because people and reporters do get things wrong. And also, more information never hurts. It can't be misleading. But I also wonder if, I guess, are you sensing more of that? Are you advising customers to, as part of going direct, to openly push back? And if so, does doing that as a person give a little more cover than doing it as a company? Or am I just too in my head because I fight these battles every day?
I do think it's real. I mean, there's the proactive side of Go Direct, which is what we've talked about up to now. And then I think what you're referencing is more the reactive side of Go Direct, where, look, if you're the spokesperson on the opening message about this and something goes wrong with it, you also have to answer for that. You sort of don't get to pick and choose when you own Atlas in Fiji's case. So if something goes wrong with it, she's accountable now for that as sort of the voice of that product increasingly at the company. And so I do think whether it's Fiji herself or the comms team there, we have seen a trend where versus 5-6 years ago, you felt this, I'm sure. Every comms person is like, yeah. I can't confirm this, but totally off the record or on background, and never want their name in the piece. We as an industry, as comms, I think helpfully are becoming more publicly accountable for the things we say and do. And so that can be what you're talking about, pushing back on social very openly and saying, hey, this story is inaccurate. But it can also be, to your point, like, hey, I owned the upfront of this news, and now I also have to own the back end of it insofar as there's critique. And I think it stems from, again, this sense that, the disembodied company voice is dying, and smart brands are not trying to live in that world anymore. They recognize that their company is synonymous with their CEO, likely, and if they're lucky, maybe a couple of other people on that bench of executives.
Yeah. Well, Allison, thank you. You've given a lot to think about, both as a CEO and founder, and to all our listeners and viewers out there. You heard it here. It's not an either or, whether to go direct.
False dichotomy. Don't believe the hype. You can do both.
Don't believe the hype, but, speak your truth. Just do it accurately.
Yes.
Well,
I can't
Allison,
wait to
thanks for
see you
joining
next
us.
week at WTF. Thank you so much for having me on. We're going to have a great time.
Can't wait for WTF, and we're going to be thrilled to see you there next week at the Informations Conference, and we'll have you back on TITV as the comm scout. So tell us what else you're seeing and thinking out there. You have a great LinkedIn, which I should highly recommend to people, where you kind of call out interesting trends, and I always learn a lot from it. So
thank you.
Great
so
to
much.
see you, Allison.
And great to see you too.
Back to you, Akash.
That was Jessica Lessin with Allison Braley. Before we end the show, I want to tell you about some exciting events happening next week. TITV will be on the ground at Adobe Max in Los Angeles. I'll chat with some key Adobe executives and partners about AI and creativity on Tuesday, October 28th. The day after that, you don't want to miss the Information's WTF Summit, aka Women in Tech, Media, and Finance. The Information's Natasha Mascarenas will host a very special edition of TITV from WTF in Napa Valley on Wednesday, October 29th. We are all very excited for that show. And with that, that does it for today's show. A reminder, we are on this stream Monday through Friday at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. I want to thank Amazon Web Services, who is our presenting sponsor for this production. And I want to thank you for tuning in. We really do appreciate your viewership. I am already excited for our next show tomorrow. Have a great rest of your Thursday. Bye-bye for now.